Hello and welcome to Brand X Reviews. Today we're going to be talking about this recent story where Idris Elba, the actor, obviously, no, Idris Elba, the politician, of course Idris Elba, the actor, he's been making comments about race and him being labelled as a black actor. There's been some fallout as a result of it, both on the insane side of Twitter. Well, is there a sane side of Twitter? I don't know. But also in the celebrity world and other famous people as well. So what I'm going to do is do a quick intro, just kind of recap where we're at with that, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to have a discussion with my co-reviewer John, who sometimes visits us on this. So let's check it out. So first on, we've had this article here from Bounding Into Comics that kind of sums things up. Now, this originally comes from an Esquire magazine interview that Idris Elba did. He's got a new movie coming out and he was asked about racism. And he effectively rejected the black actor moniker. You can see the quotes here. I don't want to be the first black, I'm the first Idris. And a lot of the stuff that he said was very life-affirming, very positive, very much common sense, pretty much the norm. To any normal person, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, this wouldn't be controversial, whereas now we have to realise that these kind of things are deemed as, well, problematic by the world's worst people acting openly. I mean, by the woke people that care so much about minority folk. So, all passive aggression there aside, let's look at the thing. I'm kind of being a bit sarcastic there, I realise. Let's do this. Let's be serious here. So let's have a look. This is the article, like I say, from Bounding Into Comics that covered this, but there's been plenty of other coverage elsewhere. So he was asked about racism, and he said, he's always curious as to why this is fascinating to people. It's a question he gets asked a lot, that kind of thing. And he doesn't go up to his black friends in conversation and ask them to talk about racism. Have I ever faced racism? Yeah. So beyond that anyway, obviously he talks about humans being obsessed with race, which is very much true at the moment as well, the last 10 years specifically. It's an obsession that can hinder people's aspirations, people's growth. Racism should be a topic for discussion, yes. It's very real, but from my perspective, it's only as powerful as you allow it to be. Like I say, very positive, very life-affirming here. Not people that focus on it, especially grifters that use it and weaponize identity politics to sell a political agenda that otherwise wouldn't sell itself. It's basically problem, reaction, solution that people are using racism to offer a solution to it. That's kind of how that works. So anyway, this is the bit that's really pissed people off when he said, I stopped describing myself as a black actor when I realised it put me in a box. We've got to grow, our skin is more than just that, it's just skin rant over. So this is something that he said, like I say, in this interview, and it's one of those things that's going to annoy a lot of people, and it certainly did. So, for example, we had Kelly Terrell, who's a screenwriter who's worked with Blumhouse and Amazon Studios. She said that Elba's comments were made with selfish intent. Now, we're going to get into this in the discussion in the main part, but this is one of the quotes. It's pretty bad. So she said that there's an innocuous way that black folks in Hollywood like Idris, Terry Crews, etc. play the good colourblind Negro to have individual success. I mean, that's just awful. That's so toxic. John Boyega had jumped in on social media as well, as you can see, saying, I think we should fixate on who is typecasting and putting actors in boxes because of this, not on making weird adjustments for them. We continuously focus on what we have to do so they don't do this or that. Very worrying. We black and that's that. Yeah, it's just, Idris Elba wasn't saying, I'm not a black man, just kind of not getting it. Idris Elba came back and said, there isn't a soul on this earth that can question whether I consider myself a black man or not. Being an actor is a profession like being an architect. They're not defined by race. However, if you define your work by race, that is your prerogative. So, very reasonable. There's been some other commentary on this as well, for example, on Sky News Australia. Well, here's a quick clip of that, and then we'll just cut back.
Well, I was very grateful that he stated the obvious, and he stated the point that we've been trying to make. For basically decades, that your race is just the color of your skin and that it shouldn't define you. I would like to point out that it's someone of his status and his recognition that can say something like this. I feel like a black actor saying something like this at the beginning of his career would absolutely not have a future in the industry, because many people read it as he was being anti-black, but he was making the point that he is black, he is proud to be black, but the point is his race is just that, the color of his skin, and it shouldn't have to invade aspects of his life, like his career, for instance. I make the point that why would someone say I'm a gay nurse? What does being gay have to do with being a nurse, right? But we make identity politics so important and so central to our lives that him saying something like this really rattled people that wanted him to toe a different line. And I think that's quite sad and disappointing. It's more to do with the fact that you are an individual first before your race, as opposed to in the US, for instance, where group identity seems to take precedence over of individual identity. And I also make the point that a lot of the people that were very angry about it were black Americans. So that should tell you something about the debate.
There you go.
So there you go. That's the gist of it. That's some of the things that's been discussed. Now we're going to cut away and get to the main part of this video. Myself and my co-reviewer John get into this further.
We've got this stuff that Idris Elba has been saying, and so we've got John on here anyway to talk about this. So now I thought it was pretty positive what Idris Elba was saying, like I say, life affirming.
Yeah, very much. I took the context from Idris Elba to be he doesn't want to be, I suppose he doesn't want to be held as kind of like he wants to be the first Idris Elba, is how I've took it. Anything that he does, he'd like to create his own legacy based on who Idris Elba is. Do you know what I mean? That's what I took it to be. And then John Boyega took it to another place altogether, I believe.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And quite a few others did. I was just saying somebody called Kelly Terrell, who's a screenwriter. She's worked with Blumhouse, Amazon Studios. She's claimed that Elba's comments were made with selfish intent. And this, to me, sounds very racist as well, what she said. And this, again, always ties in with the left and their racist anti-racism, which isn't a clever way of trying to twist it back onto them. It's just that is what it is, whether it's the soft bigotry of low expectations or whatever.
Agree with you.
Well, this is a quote anyway. There's an innocuous way that black folk in Hollywood, like Idris, Terry Crews, etc., play the good colorblind Negro to have individual success. She put that on Twitter as well. That sounds pretty nasty, pretty racist. Meanwhile, black folks like Gina, Gabrielle, John Boyega, etc., reject that bullshit to ensure communal success. Sounds very far left, all this nonsense. The usual stuff from Robin DiAngelo about whether it's white fragility or critical race theory, all that kind of garbage. It sounds very academic, but it's actually very hostile to, just open society. They want to shut everything down, what you can say, what you can think, and here's what you should think instead. And it usually ties in with critical race theory and cultural Marxism, basically.
I'm struggling to comprehend it all because right, if I look at you and I, if I want to better myself, right, and I'm talking better myself, do I not want to take whatever, as long as I'm not harming anybody else, as long as I am bettering myself, isn't that the aim of life, to become self-sufficient and self-successful, or have I missed the point in that?
Well, they would say that is white supremacy, because taking self-ownership and being successful is a white concept, which again exposes the racism of the anti-racism, which I talked about in the last video I did on this channel.
I don't agree with that, because so for example, if I go for a job, and I aren't the right person for the candidate, that doesn't mean I'm going to stop trying to be successful. I'm just going to be not the right person for that particular position that I went for. I'm not even going to ask who got the job, because it's not important to me. What's important is that the place who I've gone to get a job with, they've hired who they believe to be the right person, and surely the skill set is what counts in all of this. Or am I a million miles away there?
Well, like I say, this is the racism of anti-racism because they associate things like showing up on time, self-ownership, doing the best job, putting in the extra hours, taking responsibility, personal responsibility. Those are white concepts. So that's racist. That's what I don't like politician Ronald Reagan, but I think it was him that talked about this back in the 80s. The soft bigotry of low expectations. We saw this project, Project Veritas. I seem to remember exposed something last year where I forget which TV station it was. It might have even been one of the right-leaning ones like Fox, but it was like a local one anyway, like an affiliate from memory. And they were basically saying we're not to talk about things like cryptocurrency on daytime news when there's a large proportion of the audience which is black, because that's not something that they would be into. They don't have the capacity to understand it. And it's like, that's pretty racist. Again, it's a soft bigotry of low expectations. And we see this in the
That really is racist. That is racist I don't even think there's any element to it that is disgustingly racist.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't comprehend. And who said that? Fox?
I can't remember if it was Fox. I know there was something that came out with them around the time, but it was one of these mainstream local news affiliates. It was something from Project Veritas. I recall it was last year. That was a typical example anyway. Just basically saying, like I say, concepts like turning up on time, things like maths, being good at maths, is a white concept. So basically, being shit at things is to be associated with being black, and crime as well. There's something I read today about. I think it was in California. Check out if you go to the gramophonemine.com. There's a story in today's as well. I think about people disrupting. They're going to make it illegal to suspend disruptive students because that disproportionately will mean that that black students are getting suspended. It's basically saying that all the ones that are disruptive are black. That's a bit racist, you know.
But isn't the better approach to take to get rid of anybody who is disruptive to hold everybody to a higher standard?
But me and you don't automatically think that the ones being disruptive are black. That's the difference. We're kind of saying that anybody can have the opportunity of being an arsehole. We don't necessarily say, but the one
Chief arsehole here at times.
yeah, we've all been.
Do you know what I mean? I can happily say that, but that isn't defined by any culture, any religious traits, any cultural traits. I was an arsehole because I was an arsehole. That was the bottom line to it, wasn't it? There was times where I know you've said myself, I am a bit. Have you? How did you refer to me? I'm a bit of a liability, and it's true. There has been moments in time, and I've got better as I've got older. You know, I'm in my 40s now. That doesn't come out so often, but there are times where I literally had to fight against my own natural instinct, and eventually my natural instinct becomes what I'm no longer fighting against. It just becomes who you are. But that does show that the arsehole does disappear, and I'm sorry, but it isn't. But arseholes are not. It's not related to colour or creed. It's just the individual. And that is true. It's the individual. And you can blame it on anything, circumstances. You can blame it on whatever you like. But ultimately, it is down to your individual choice because you have thought about it. You've thought about it. You've seen that facial expression that I used to get. You can see it's happening. I'm thinking about it. And now I'm going to act on it. So I've got about 4 or 5 times where I could have taken a step back from myself. And I didn't used to do that. Whereas I take the immediate step back now. That's the difference.
Yeah, exactly. That's self-ownership and personal responsibility, and apparently that is white supremacist concept. So yeah, you can't win that. You can't argue against. That's just what they're saying. A lot of people are buying into this because it's trendy, and there's a new ruling class that's emerging, and they're not just in the universities anymore. Like we were saying a few years ago, these people are going to enter the real world, and they are doing, and they're entering into politics, the media, beyond just being in your HR department. And that brings us back to where we are with Idris Elba. He's made these comments that were kind of Martin Luther King-esque in terms of color blindness, saying that people should be defined by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Yep. The anti-racists would strongly disagree with that and say that to disregard the color of someone's skin is to disregard the victimization, the slavery, all that stuff. So for me to say to someone who's black, for example, I don't see you as a black person, you're a person just like me, is being racist because I'm denying the fact that I have privilege and power that they don't have. I mean, I obviously dismiss that as absolute garbage, but
wasn't it Morgan Freeman though, who a number of years ago called, how did he phrase Black History Month? And I don't want to be wrong here, but I'm sure he referred to it as nonsense. I'm sure that's his words, not mine, that he referred it to it as a nonsense because he just wants to be known as Morgan Freeman. And why is it that you only get a month that recognises importance of Black history? And I think that is a very important thing. History is history, and I think you should be celebrating it, and you should also be using history to make sure that we don't fall into the pitfalls of where we've gone before, because you sure as hell don't want to see Ku Klux Klan marches everywhere, do you? And that's the importance of history. You don't want to see that.
Or the anti-racists doing the same thing, because whether it's the left wing or the right wing that are using identity politics for divide and conquer purposes, it's still pretty bad. I mean, people obviously have a bit of a blind spot, a lack of empathy for the victims of the far left in the 20th century. 100 million dead, and for those that didn't die, life was pretty crap. There was a whole Cold War over it. I'm not saying that current woke identity politics was at the heart of that, but obviously these are the people, that mindset, that is behind all this now. So who knows where it's going to go. So I say there's that Kelly Terrell comment anyway, and as you said, John Boyega kind of came into this on social media, talking about pigeonholing and putting actors in boxes, typecasting, and who's doing that. It was very much it's them, those people, as in white people, doing that. And it's people, ironically, it's people like the guy writing, about it, John Boyega. He's the one that brings everything down to race. So if we're talking about why you're being pigeonholed as a black actor, he was one of the first people in the 2020 riots in London, collaborating with Black Lives Matter, the organisation.
And it's kind of ironic that he's gone at Idris, considering that Idris, and I don't know if it's been took for a second season or if indeed it was just a one season thing, but Idris did a program on Sky last year. It was I can't remember if I didn't see. This is the thing. I downloaded it all. I should have thought about this before we started tonight. He'd done a comedy, I think it was, based on his own experiences as growing up as a young man in his area, and it was basically it was his life sort of a thing, and it turned out very well. That's he came up with it, he pitched it, Sky broadcast it. Do you know what I mean? So I fail to see how to phrase it properly. That program was representative of Idris Elba, and every character in there was representative of Idris's life, and it was brilliant. It was a really entertaining program, and I'll certainly be going back to watch it again because it was just done right. There was no sort of hullabaloo about it. It was just a program to broadcast. Sky actually do a lot of this really well. They don't sort of kneel into it as much as what other places do. If a program's going to come out, a program's going to come on, and it's going to be really good. There's Gangs of London. The main protagonist in there, he's a black man, for want of a better description. He's a black man. He's leading that, and he's a brilliant character. It could have gone to anyone, but he is absolutely fantastic in it. So I just, what are we to take from it with John Boyega's comments that people should actively be trying to seek out lesser roles? Is that what I don't understand what his point is, because Idris has certainly been successful. John Boyega, Star Wars, he was very successful there. What's he done since Star Wars? What's his choices of roles been since Star Wars? Because he would have had the world at his feet at the end of Star Wars episode, the first. Well, they would have had it at his feet. It really would have done. And I believe it's his comments in media that's probably maybe restricting him right now.
Yeah, and it did suck like what Disney did to him as well with
absolutely, yeah,
with China. If you look at the difference between the Force Awakens poster in the USA, the UK, where we are, and the same poster in China, they shrunk his character down. Little things like that sucked. And again, this is supposed to be a progressive company. But going back to the thing with Idris Elba and John Boyega, I think it's an interesting contrast because, funnily enough, I was watching Prometheus yesterday with my girlfriend, and she was talking about Idris Elba and saying, he's been voted like the world's sexiest man or Britain's sexiest man or whatever, and she was kind of saying like, what is it about him? What are people like seeing in him? And I said, well, not to sound gay, but you don't want to say that to your girlfriend, but not to sound gay, but it's like, well, it's his charm, his charisma, his kind of alpha status that he just kind of puts out there just by appearing on screen, something that John Boyega doesn't have, because Idris Elba doesn't, well, this isn't the sole reason, but Idris Elba doesn't look at himself as a victim. He's a guy who takes charge, or at least that's what he kind of puts out there. And with comments like this, backs it up. John Boyega, in contrast, he's not one of those people. He's a bit of a crybaby. I mean, some of his backstory is pretty sad. I think his family knew the Damilola Taylor, the little kid who got killed, and that was actually racist.
Very much so.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily indicative of society as a whole. It was a very extreme example. So I do empathise with John Boyega at the same time. We're kind of ripping into him, but he's chosen a dark path, and
yeah, I mean, look at Idris though. Do you remember he should have had his biggest breakout role should have been Bastille Day, which we will know as The Take, and there was that incident in France, and that effectively derailed his career for a while. And he could have really gone all sorts of. He could have come out with all sorts on that, but he didn't mention it. He just gets on with it. This is what I like about him. It's that quality. I suspect when you see him in real life, he's the person you see on the likes of the Graham Norton show. That's the only one I can think of at the top of my head. I'm not mentioning Corden. Oh, you know what I mean? So whenever you see him, it's the same person. You don't get a sense. And if he's interviewed on the street or on a red carpet, it is the same person. There is no superficiality to him. He is what he is. And that's what I like about him. It's just a shame he isn't 10 years younger, because I think he would make the perfect Bond. But if Daniel Craig's too old at his age, Idris is too old, and that isn't unless of course they're going for an older Bond. If they are going for an older Bond, Idris has to be in with a shoe in. He has to be. But if they are going to reboot again, I think they should go even younger than Daniel Craig was. Sorry to go off on tangent there, but if they are going for another Bond, or they're going to try and meld it in like they used to do with Connery and Roger Moore, Idris Elba, I think he would absolutely make it. But the question is, when you're a middle-aged man like I am, would you want to be doing all them stunts in your 40s?
Not with my sciatica, I wouldn't.
But this is the whole thing. But he would have been absolutely perfect. And this is where I think sometimes the Bond, yes, it is an event, but why couldn't you have had like? It's another story for another time, I think, but different Bonds at the same thing. So you've got your Daniel Craig strand going on, but then you've got another strand going on. It's all good, isn't it? It's all Bond, as long as we don't have Jane Bond.
Yeah, well, it's all interesting, and I think the optics of it would have been a bit weird to sort of get used to. But I mean, he ticks all the right boxes, does he?
Yes, he does.
Saying that's just the age thing that's the main thing, really. So
absolutely, look how well he is in Fast and Furious. He's absolutely incredible in the that spin-off that they did. Absolutely incredible. He commands a presence, and isn't that what acting is? Somebody who can walk on screen, male or female, and they command presence.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna have to cut it short because the video is going to be long, but yeah, all good points anyway. So I think we've straightened things out a little bit there. We've both kind of ranted a little bit there, but it's all good. So yeah.
Yeah. As long as I think it's okay to vent and it's okay to rant, as long as to coin it, as long as you're not abusive, as long as you're not derogatory, as long as you're not demeaning, as long as you're not a fascist or racist, it is okay to vent. As long as you've got reason, as long as you've got just cause to vent and you can back it up, I think it's fine. But thank you for inviting me on again. I really enjoy these.
Yeah. Well, to me, Idris Elba might not have actually played Bond, but to me, he's got it as an honorary title. He's my 007. He's Idris Elba. It's just an honorary title. It doesn't mean that he's played it, but he's
I get
Yeah.
where I get where you're coming from. It's just excellent, and I'm going to watch The Take tonight. I think I've got it queued up, ready to watch now for a while. So that's going to be what I'm going to finally get round to watching tonight.
Yeah. Then there was Luther as well. Was amazing. Really
No,
good.
I've never watched Luther, not
Yeah.
because of Idris, but because of the BBC. And you know my views on the BBC.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you can put that aside because I mean, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and I'd give it a go if you can have the time to watch it. It is a very good show.
I might do that. I'll take your recommendation on that.
Yeah. Anyway, right, I'll leave it there. So, Brandex reviews, and yeah, thanks a lot, John, for appearing. And
Thank you.
um,